Before we bestow this award to Mr. Colbert, I would like to give a bit of background to the award and what the Phil endeavors to achieve. The Phil is the world's oldest student society and has recorded the presence of many remarkable members, including Oscar Wilde, Jon Stewart, and Samuel Beckett, across 340 years of history. Today, we have over 10,000 members from all corners of the globe. Each year, the Council elects a select number of new honorary patrons to the society based on their significant contribution in their respective fields. This includes figures such as President Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Martin Scorsese, Margaret Atwood, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Al Pacino, Gloria Steinem, Courtney Love, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Nancy Pelosi, Lauren Summers, Dame Helen Mirren, Whoopi Goldberg, and a wide range of Nobel laureates, world leaders, Olympians, academics, and Oscar and Grammy Award winners. This year, our council has elected Stephen Colbert in honor of receiving the Gold Medal of Honorary Patronage for his outstanding contributions to journalism, comedy, and political discourse. Stephen Colbert is an American comedian, television host, writer, and producer, best known for his sharp political satire and quick wit. He gained national prominence as a correspondent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart before creating and hosting the Colbert Report, the satirical news program which he portrayed apparently conservative political pundits. Since 2015, Colbert has hosted the Late Show with Stephen Colbert on CBS, bringing his signature humor and insightful political commentary to late-night television. His background in improvisational comedy, both at the Second City in Chicago, helped shape his unique comedic style. Colbert has won multiple Emmy Awards and Peabody Awards for his work in comedy and television. Beyond television, Colbert has authored 6 books, including I, America, and So Can You, and most recently, Does This Taste Funny, a cookbook co-authored with him. Colbert's blend of humor, intellect, charisma, and more has cemented him as one of the most influential satirists and talk show hosts in American media. We are absolutely honored to present this award to him today.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful to join you here at Trinity College, and I'm honored, if slightly confused, to be given the Golden Medal of Honorary Patronage. I would have settled for the bronze. Thank you to Phil, as I understand the cool kids call it. It's lovely to be back in Dublin. Whenever I'm in Ireland, which isn't nearly enough, I immediately feel at home. I start drinking dark beer. I sing songs about hard labor I've never done and troubles I've never had. Some part of me always thinks I should stay here. Yes. Given what's happening in my country right now, that part of me these days is my brain. So if I could just crash on someone's couch for the next 40 years, I'd be very grateful. Not that I could ever leave America. I'm not Irish. I'm Irish-American, 100%. But I don't confuse the two. But something here in your country, or this country, so not all of you are from here, but something in this country speaks to me in the light of the sky and in the rhythm of the idiom. Also, being among the Irish, I don't feel quite so pale. Whenever I'm here, I think about my family and the ones who left here to come to the United States. I'm sure they share a similar story to so many people who went west, as so many church ledgers say in my family. When I was 14, my mother and I came over here looking for ancestors of her on Roscommon, and we found a lot of devils. We found them in graveyards, and the church ledgers would just simply say some polite variation on went west, which meant America. I imagine they came here for the same reason a lot of people did. Relief from a desperate life, economic opportunity. Though some of my family came here, a lot of them came actually before the potato famine. My mother's family, the Tooks, or Tucks as we say in the United States, came to the States in the 1820s. And thousands of Irish laborers who were enticed to come to dig something called Clinton's Ditch. They were quarrymen, and they ended up digging the Erie Canal. And that's how we got to New York. No doubt there were political reasons as well. Reasons of freedom from autocratic rule. So this weekend, I've been thinking about why my family left this beautiful country to come to my beautiful country. and hoping that that promise of freedom and a better life will last in the United States. But I could never leave America. Even if I did, it wouldn't leave me. I would always remain an American. In the same way as if I left the Roman Catholic Church, I would remain a Catholic. Some part of me will always hold tight to a belief in the ideals of America and the fundamental goodness of that creed. And that unkillable love of my country makes my governments transparent toward my governments. You can tell how upset it makes me because I can't even read my own words. That unkillable love for my country makes my government's transparent turn toward authoritarianism only that much more painful. It's love that breaks your heart. If you'll indulge an outsider's view of Ireland, I think it's very Irish not only to love with a broken heart, but to love a broken heart. As New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan said in 1963, I don't think there's any point in being Irish if you don't know that the world is going to break your heart. And one of the things I love most about the Irish is that the Irish can be sad, and they can be funny, but best of all, they can be funny about being sad. After many years of doing the job that brought me this great honor today, I sometimes wonder what the point of that job is, what that job is now. Don't make a mistake, I believe that jokes have a virtue and a value and a reward all of their own. But I wanted to do a late night show that was somehow, and I don't know how, somehow would be about love. And I think I've ended up doing a show that's about loss. We often don't know what we love until we see people who are losing it. Well, I'm here to tell you it was 2025, and I've never loved my country more. As I said, I'm deeply honored to be given this award, but also mildly confused. Because it says, well, I'll get to what it says in a moment. I'm not confused that I'm included on your list of people you give the people for. This is not humility. I'm a huge fan of me. I know a lot of people on this list already. I've interviewed Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Not that funny. I've interviewed Martin Scorsese. I've not only interviewed, but done sketch comedy with Joe Biden. Wait, this is true. I worked out with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I fired t-shirt cans in a cheering crowd with Bernie Sanders. I have cooked with Gloria Steinem. I have met the Pope with Whoopi Goldberg. This is absolutely true, and she started it. I have made out with Helen Mirren. This honor you give today is a close second to the highest honor. So it's not the company I question, as I said. It's the rationale and the invitation that I question. It says that I have been given this august prize, quote, in recognition of my outstanding contributions to journalism, comedy, and political discourse. So I should warn you, just full disclosure, I've made a profitable career making fun of journalism. Many journalists think that I have degraded the public discourse. Half of America doesn't think I'm a comedian. Nevertheless, I am grateful for your poor judgment. And I thank you for this great honor from the bottom of my broken heart.
I will say, so I will do a Q&A, and at the end I will open it up to the audience if you have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Colbert. So just to start, you grew up in a large Catholic family in South Carolina. I'm curious how that shaped your worldview and also your sense of humor.
Well, let's see. I grew up in South Carolina. Most of my brothers and sisters grew up elsewhere. In 1969, my father was made essentially the provost of the University of South Carolina. He was an academician and a physician and immunologist. And he was born in the Bronx. in New York. My mom grew up in Larchmont, for those of you in the New York area. And they started dating when they were 12. and that was pretty much it. And they had 11 children. I'm the youngest of 11, not just 11. So I always had an audience, and that shaped my need for attention. And I have 3 elder sisters. There are 8 boys, 3 girls. And so I got beaten up a lot in a loving way. Everybody in the family, we're all champion talkers, and it was a humorocracy. So whoever was funniest in that moment was the king of the room. And I don't think I'm the funniest one in my family, and neither does my family. My brothers especially. They're funny. I think the funniest person in my family is my sister Mary. And she's my eldest sister and kind of my other mom, because my mom didn't have any time to raise me because I was the 11th. And so my sister Mary in some way was my mother. I kind of took this job, I took over with Mr. Letterman because my sister Mary thought it would be a good idea. Because I did a lot of my career for my mother, because my father and 2 of my brothers died when I was 10 in a plane crash. And so there was just me and my mom, being the last child. There were the 2 brothers up from me. And then my sister Elizabeth, Lulu, to us, Elizabeth was off at college, and Jay was at college, and Tom was in college, and Bill was off in law school, and the rest of them were married and off. So starting at age 10, we went from a big house, about 8 people in the house. And because of various people going to college, going to graduate school, 3 people dying, it went from a huge house full of people to just me and mom, suddenly. And so what I did was I made her laugh. And it's clear now that that's why this happened, and why I'm here with you right now. But it was, I was probably 50 before I admitted that to myself, because I couldn't associate this thing I love with such a tragic thing. So that's probably why I'm a comedian. But that's not exactly why I'm a comedian, because a lot of people have tragedy, and not everybody goes into comedy. But I don't know any comedians who don't have some tragedy.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. You initially studied philosophy before you switched majors at also universities to study theater and comedy.
Yes.
Was there a moment that was kind of like the change maker for you in there?
Philosophy and acting involves a lot of self-reflection. And so I figured if I was going to navel gaze, I might as well have a career out of it. Because my brother said, "Are you going to open a philosophy shop?" So I did the one thing that probably had worse career prospects than a philosopher, and that was an actor. I was studying. I went to college with no sense of what I was going to do. I was a terrible student. I was someone who tested very well, but didn't do any schoolwork. Because after my father and my brothers died, after that thing happened, there was nothing anyone could threaten me with. You know what I mean? And a lot of the reason why you do well in school, some of it, I'm sure you're a great student. I'm sure all of you are great students. But for me, there was a fair amount of threat involved with getting your schoolwork done. You didn't want a bad grade. And I just could care less about what my grades were. And so what I did was, I retreated into books. And I read about a book a day for 8 years, something like that. Mostly science fiction and fantasy, but some historical fiction and stuff like that. And when I ran out of books, because I would run out of books, I would use all my allowance of the week to go to a local store for the book bag and buy whatever. A lot of Mad magazine too. And so I read the encyclopedia. So I just read the encyclopedia, A to Z. And so I graduated from high school incidentally. Because I read enough so I could bullshit my way through almost anything except math or language. And those are the things that almost kept me from graduating. And then I went to a university that would accept me, Hampton Sydney College in Hampton Sydney, Virginia, which is old, 1775 was the first graduating class. And a great school, but a very little known school. And when I was there, the first class I fell in love with was a philosophy class. And my father loved philosophy. My father's idea of fun was reading French Christian humanists. And so I read a lot. I read like Jacques Maritain and L'Amboise, famous quotation. And we got a L'Amboise quotation in the pocket. Philosophical society. Or the Christian humanist out of fashion now. He said, "The only sadness is not to be a saint, which I love. Which I totally believe that somewhere in there's a saint, I believe, has a natural capacity to perceive the world in a way that is unfiltered, to see the world, as John A.G. says in Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, in all its cruel and radiant beauty. And because I had suffered something cruel when I was a child, that had its own radiant beauty, because I don't think that happiness is necessarily the best thing in life. I think the sublime is the best thing in life, and surcease from sorrow is sublime, but you only get that if you have the sorrow first. So it's the wound as much as the release that gives you a certain type of joy that you can only share with other people who have suffered something similar. And so that led me to embracing philosophy.
Okay.
And so I did 2 years of philosophy and fell in love with the Stoics. And Stoicism is very popular these days, but I was a Stoic before it was cool. And I love Marcus Aurelius. One of my favorite quotes is, "Let us have an end to this debate about what makes a good man, and do you one?" You know? So that's a form of philosophy. It's not so much navel gazing, but almost as an action. And then I did that for 2 years. And then when I was at college, I had done one play, secretly wanted to act, because my mom wanted to act. She had been accepted to Carnegie before it was Carnegie Mellon in the United States, the Carnegie Institute of Technology, CIT, whose nickname is Christ I'm Tired. They had a very good theater program that worked you very hard. So she wanted to be an actress, but she got very ill, and before she recovered from her illness, my father said, "Will you marry me?" So instead of being an actress, she got 11 children. So she acted for us. She loved theater, she loved acting, and she did things when I was a kid, like teach me how to do stage falls, how to die without hurting yourself. In the kitchen, she would do this, she'd go, put one hand against her head, and then she would lie down, she would fall to the ground, it would be ankle, knee, hip, like chest, shoulder, head. She would go, and you wouldn't hurt yourself. So I would do that with her when I was a kid. I would pretend to die. So I knew she wanted to be an actress, and I didn't necessarily do it for her, but I got that bug, or rather the permission to go do it, because it's kind of a daring thing. You really roll in the bones, to be an artist of any kind. But actors are notoriously 95% unemployed. But so many things pointed me in the way of acting. But my senior year of high school, I finally had the courage to audition for something. And I got the part. And I had a good time. And I got to perform opposite my girlfriend. So when we kissed on stage, it was real. and then after my senior year, they brought a New York company brought a play to Charleston. And the boy who was playing the teenage part in it was called The Leper by Giancarlo Menotti. That boy had dropped out at the last moment. So they had an audition in Charleston. And my choir master, I was a bass in the choir, my choir master said, "You should go over, because he had directed the show. "You should go over and see, I got a part." So I'm 18, I'm working with professional actors, and they were nice to me. They said, "You could do this." And I husbanded that thing. Somebody said you were good at something. I'm sure you're all going through some of that yourself. What is it you're going to do with your life? And it may not be what you planned, but that's okay. Don't hold yourself to your present plan. It works out for almost nobody. If everybody stuck to their first plan, the world would be full of cowboys and princesses. And so in my heart, I went, "Oh, maybe I could be an actor." These professionals thought I could do it. So after 2 years, I was miserable, by the way. Philosophy didn't make me happy. I was miserable. Cruel and radiant beauty. Not just radiant beauty, but the cruel beauty of living. And so I was super depressed. I lost 50 pounds my freshman year because I couldn't bring myself to eat. And I couldn't figure out why to get up and get out of bed. And the only thing that made me happy was acting. And I did shows at school. And I was, I weigh 195 pounds this morning. I weighed myself. I don't recommend it, but I weighed myself this morning. And I weighed 135 pounds. So it takes 60 pounds off me. And it was the color of your coat. I don't know, absolutely green. And I thought, well, the only thing I work hard at, the only thing that I really like, the only thing I'll show up too early and stay late, the only thing I'll work hard at, but nobody has to ask me. There's no threat, you know, there's no stick here, it's all carrot with acting. Or not even acting, just being in a theater. I would tear tickets, I would do sound, I would paint the sets, I would clean up, I would do anything. If the theater was empty, I would still sit in it. I just felt better, I felt at home in there, I can't tell you why. I just went, this, I mean, I always felt like an outsider. And this felt like home to me. So I thought to myself, wisdom is lost on those who will not act wisely. I should do something about it. And I went, okay, where can you get an undergraduate degree and still study theater? And Northwestern is a very good school in that regard in the United States, where you still got a liberal arts education, but you got a theater degree at the end of it. And I applied myself when I got to college. I was very, again, big fan of myself, and I was very transparent about it. You're like, all right, now I'm going to come out with this, like the sun behind the cloud. I'm going to show them that there's a reason why I tested high, and I'm actually applying myself. So I did well in the first 2 years. I got into Northwestern, and I got to change my life. I had a great time. I wasn't that much happier, but I still couldn't quite understand why to get out of bed in the morning. It was pretty bad, actually. But I recovered by about a year out of college. I got better at it. But so that's a long answer to your question. It's the only thing that I would work at, and you didn't have to ask me. That's why I became an actor.
Makes sense, yeah. You went on then afterwards to become part of Second City. And I'm curious if there were like any takeaways from your group, any influences there, or if there are any fond memories that you have.
Oh, when I was in Northwestern, a friend of mine said, and Chris Paff, who thankfully lives in the town, we live in Montclair, New Jersey, he lives there too now. But Chris said, hey, there's this thing downtown called the Herald Improv. And it was basically an improvised one-act plays. And it was 6 people went on stage, and they did 3 sets of 3 scenes, so 9 scenes altogether, that based on a single word of suggestion. And something very mundane, like not, you would say like philosophy or truth, it would be paper, wood, water, fire, like really, they weren't elemental, simple things. And then you would improvise one-act play. And as soon as I went to go see it, I went, I don't know why, but I have to do this. And it wasn't just I was like too lazy to memorize lines. I really felt like there was something pure about going on stage with no plan, and then trusting the other person. And what I love about improvisation is that the other person is the most important person on stage. And you were here to, it was very like, it was very in keeping with my very religious upbringing. Like I haven't even touched on that, but like my mother was a daily communicant, and after my father and my brothers died, I was too, because she couldn't leave me at home. So it was every day with me and mom and the nuns. And I got a lot from it. I got a lot from it. But one of the things I got was the idea of the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And so I love that rule. I love that sense of improvisation. That was very overt when you were being taught, was that you were here to serve the servant and follow the follower. And if I trust that you're doing it too, we won't know whose idea it was. And that was the magic moment when you improvise a scene together. You don't have to go out there and do a 10-minute scene, and the audience loved it, and then you came back on stage and you have no idea where all of that came from. It really did. It felt like real magic to me. That you and I made an agreement just to trust. I mean, really, it's about love, right? We went out there to trust and pay attention to each other. I love that from. Have you all seen Lady Bird? When the nun says, "You really seem to love Sacramento," and she says, "Well, I mean, I pay attention. I pay attention to it." And the nun says, "Don't you think that might be the same thing? Attention, love." Which I love about that. I'm very grateful for writing that, because we all need new words for love, right? Because love gets is a worn out word sometimes. It gets thrown at us so much. So I love the idea of paying attention. And the whole trick of improvisation is, for me, was can you pay attention to what's happening on stage as closely as the audience does? They're much better at it than you are on stage, because they're not nervous that you're going to do it. You're nervous that you're going to do it. But if you can just observe the way they do, then they'll understand the thing that you're creating on. They understand what you're making. They see every object work, like every time that you go to pour yourself a glass of something, you have to put it down. And you have to get rid of the bottle too, because it fell off because it's a slanted surface, you know? They pay attention. And I love the idea that all you had to be was attentive And I fell in love with this writer named Keith Johnstone, who I don't know if you know, he's got a book called Improv. One of the things he talks about is attending stage. Can you attend what you're doing? And that led to my life. Can you attend your life? Can we have a moment together where I'm paying as much attention to you as I do to an improv partner? Because there's nothing you and I are doing right now, it's like improv, and I'm hogging the stage. You're doing a very good job. And so I fell in love with that. And then I didn't want to be at Second City. Second City was not improvisation, man. Fuck those people. We're the Herald Improv. And we were like rebels. We were anti-establishment improvisers. We were, you know, it was very like, no. We just opened my teeth. I didn't taught me improvisation. The first teacher I had was a guy named Del Close, who was a real godfather and grandfather of improvisation in Chicago. And he was a pagan, he was a real pagan. And whenever he improvised, he took out his pentagram and put it on his chest. He said, I am not speaking, the universe is speaking. He meant it. That's why I did not fall into his sway. As a Catholic, I thought, maybe I shouldn't follow a pagan. And so, but, shit, where was I going? Anyway, I found it really bled over into my life, and I didn't want to work at Second City. I was an actor, and I didn't realize that Second City was really a theater. It wasn't a comedy club. It was a theater created by actors who were trying to create a form of theater that was related to jazz. That's how I saw improvisation. It was acting jazz. And instead of taking a musical theme, they took an intellectual and emotional theme, and they spun it out in scenes. And so I fell in love with that. But then I was super unemployed. Super unemployed, living on a friend's floor. And I had another friend who was the box office manager at Second City, Anne Libero, great girl, way more Irish than I am. And she said, "You can answer the phones here. I know you don't have any money. I know you don't have a place to live. I smell bad." Because I didn't have access to laundry or anything like that. And she said you could work here. And I worked there every day I possibly could, answering the phones. And because I worked there, I could take classes there for free. And I went, well, I don't respect these people, but I gotta stay sharp, so I'll take some improv classes. And I found out they cared as much as any of us highfalutin people who going to acting school cared. And I learned a ton there. And the people who were like with me, right before me and right after me, like kind of my cohort of people there, Steve Carell, a year ahead of me. Chris Farley, he was my year. Do you guys know who Amy Sedaris is, or David Sedaris? Yeah. Amy was a year ahead. She was hired the same day I was. The day I was hired was Paul Dinello, who was, you guys ever seen a show called Strangers with Candy that I did? He's Mr. Noblet, and he's Mr. Gentleman, I'm his lover, Mr. Noblet. And he dated Amy, and Amy Sedaris, and Chris Farley, and Rose Abdu, who you'd recognize. The people who were on stage when I was there were Bonnie Hunt and Mike Myers, and we just missed like Homer Simpson, Dan Castellaneta was 2 years ahead of me. And I fell in love with the place. I went, oh, I was wrong. What a stuck-up idiot I was. Everybody here cares. And you know why we were jealous? Because they were sold out every night. There was not a night we could go to Second City back in the day when it wasn't sold out every night. And it was an amazing experience. I toured for 4 years in the National Touring Company. And then I quit because they wouldn't put me on stage. Because you wanted to make it the main stage in Chicago. I toured for 4 years, quit 3 times. I did straight theater in Chicago at various different places. Not comedic, like straight, like, you know, very important theater. I'm not saying it wasn't important, but I work with people who also look down at Second City. Because it's got this weird dichotomy between the acting side and the improv side of Chicago, and both sides are great. And I'll tell you the moment that I decided to be a comedian. You want to hear that? Okay. So there's an old you know what a blackout is? It's a really short sketch. Basically put in a show for pace. And here, the blackout goes like this. You're supposed to pretend, you walk out on stage and you've got a guitar. And you go out there and you pretend you're at a coffee house and you've got a mic and you've got your guitar. It's an actual guitar and an actual mic, but I'm doing object work now. You go out there and you wear a beret, a scarf or something like that, and you go like, welcome to, ding, 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 welcome to the Mushroom and Coffee House. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And I'd like to do a song for you now. This is a song for the whales. Ding, 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 ding. Very simple, not a great joke, but never fails. So I'm backstage at Second City, and I'm trying to figure. I'm still at a point in my life like, what am I gonna do with my life? And it's backstage with me and one of the guy named Dave Rosowski, who's got a great podcast you listen to about improvisation. And Dave and I are backstage, and I'm trying to figure out whether I would dedicate myself. I wasn't yet on the main stage. Will I dedicate my life to comedy, or will I go be an actor? I wasn't thinking about it that way, but I knew that I had to make some decision about, like, karate yes or karate no. Because right, I was like crushed like grape. I was between the two. And this girl named Jenna Jollivis goes out to do whales. And she goes like this, and she's like, hello, welcome to Mushroom and Coffee House, and I'd like to do a song for you now. Like, ding, 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 ding. She's doing everything. And we're waiting backstage to go on. And she goes, nothing. It gets nothing. And we're in the wings, and there's only a curtain in the wings. There's no true wings. This is a cabaret theater. And Jay and I are looking at each other, what's going on? Why? I don't understand. This is a foolproof scene. Not great, but it's a foolproof. And so she's like, okay, I'm not doing the hard enough. She's like, silence. And then she goes, and Jenna had the way of speaking like this. And she goes, oh, I forgot to mention, this is a song for whales. And Dave and I looked at each other and we went, oh, and we hugged each other out of the joy of her enormous failure. And we started laughing so hard at her basic fuck up that any one of us could have done. And we hugged each other and it started falling like a fully constructed teepee. We started falling down like this. And our feet go out onto stage, and we're literally banging our feet with the joy of her failure. And then she starts laughing because she knows how we're feeling, because she would have laughed at us too. And the thing is, in straight theater, if you fuck up on stage in straight theater, when you come backstage, the other people back there will be going like, how's it going out there? Seems kind of quiet. Whatever like that. But I love this so much more. I went, if failure can be this joyful, even the person failing, when we're together, we're all failing together, and have that much fun failing, I'm like, well, I have to do this for the rest of my life. Because half of it's going to be failure, and I might as well have fun doing it. And at that moment, I went, I will do this for the rest of my life. That's how it came about. Long answers from Stephen Colbert.
Part of your career.
Yes.
Obviously, you've done a lot for the Daily Show, the Colbert Report, and now the Late Show.
I was at the Daily Show before Jon Stewart or something. He joined my show.
And I'm just curious how your approach to late night has evolved, especially in recent years, given that there's a lot more different media consumption, more short form stuff now. How's that changed?
Ooh, it's interesting. Okay, I'll try to make this pithy. When I joined something called The Daily Show, which I didn't want to join because it wasn't the show it became. It was one show under Craig Colbert when it first started, which was a fine show, just not my cup of tea. But I needed a job desperately. So I got there and it was kind of like Second City. I went, oh, everybody here really cares. I really like what they're trying to do. I changed my pollutant attitude. And then left and created a show called Strangers with Candy, and then came back when Jon Stewart was there. And then Jon had turned it from almost like a local news format to like a magazine show. And I learned a lot from Jon. Before I worked with Jon, I never did anything that was topical. I never did anything that was like current events, because I wanted everything I did to still be funny 10 years from now. So purposely, my writing partner is Paul Denell and Sedaris, and we would never refer to a real place or a real event ever, because we really wanted this sketch to still be funny. Like that's what we love about Second City. The sketch that we did in 1959 that was still funny in 1989 when we were there, and so we wanted our work to be like that. And then I got to the Daily, and I was asked to have an opinion, and it turned out I had one, and that really changed. That really changed my career. Jon said, "But do you actually feel some way about what happened?" And I said, "I do." He goes, "Then just write that. You don't have to write how I feel. Write how you feel." But he was very generous that way. And so I did that for a few years, and I said, this is great, but I want to do something else. He goes, "Well, why don't we do a show together?" So we together came up with the idea of the report. Now, this now to answer your question, is that Jon and I no longer do the same thing. I do something different than Mr. Stewart does on Mondays at the Daily Show. I think that he is absolutely as sharp and as funny and as relevant as ever. It's really quite infuriating. But it's that I think he's engaged in a rhetorical exercise. He's arguing a point. And when I did the report, the Colbert Report, that was a rhetorical exercise every day. My joke about that show was, you could have described the show this way: "Hello," he argued. Everything was an argument with an emotional underpinning, because it was character work. What I was arguing was, you agree with me and you love me, right? Mostly you love me, right? And if I saw the crowd going in a direction, my character, he would have switched. Because often the angriest people are really trying to be loved. And I'm in media, I believe. My models, the people I was model myself on, actually, I think were people who felt very outnumbered. And so I was engaging in a rhetorical exercise. I no longer do that. I'm there to be with my audience. My show is much more about community now. I heard this term I didn't know before called third space. Do you know this? It's like your home, there's your work, but then there's a third space, a place to gather. And I think the show has become a third place. Some place we can be together and come to an agreement that we're not crazy. All of this is crazy, right? Because I think that my country, maybe a lot of countries, but I think my country specifically right now is under psychological attack. And I mean that, I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean that quite literally. The United States right now is the victim of a psyop. And I think social media has a lot to do with that. Now, as a performer, as a writer, when I started doing, certainly becoming sort of, part of the expression, sort of mature creative before social media existed. Even the report existed before Twitter, which is really the proximate occasion. And I, Biz Stone, who's one of the original creators of Twitter, came on when Twitter was 1 year old. And I was, my Twitter feed, I will never call it anything but Twitter. My Twitter feed still exists, unless he sees this and ends it. Which would be fine. I have 19, 20 million followers or something, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Long before he bought it. I saw the poisoning happen years ago, and I haven't been on my phone for 3 years. The first thing that happened to us was, a lot of people are funny. And if you take millions of people all taking a stab at what happened today, every joke is going to be eaten before we get there. We'll get to the bush and the berries will all be gone. And so we had to stop worrying about what was on social media. Because it doesn't mean what they're saying on social media counts. Of course it counts. Everybody's voice is just as valuable as another person's voice. But as a professional, I can't worry if somebody had already ground that grist into the mill for their bread, because I had to make a loaf today. So I no longer paid any attention to happening on social media in terms of what the content was. In terms of competition, my favorite thing to do is just to get lost in Instagram Reels, because my competition is not Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. My competition is sleep and TikTok. Those are my Instagram Reels, something like that. Those are the things that really, even now I can feel the tug of my phone, which I think I left upstairs. Could someone check? That's my real competition, is just that constant, the tug of the machine, as we used to call it. The little tug on the sleeve to stop paying attention to what's in front of you, but instead what's being fed to you. because in social media, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, social media is like chips. You know, American chips, not your chips. Doritos. It's like Doritos. It's like they're poisoned just to the bliss point, where you that's not enough. 90 seconds of a reel is not enough to satisfy me, so I have to have another. Whereas 90 minutes, and I can be done. And so we've been, that's a form of psychological assault that I don't actually think is malicious. I think it's merely capitalistic. But I also think that my country, at least, is under a malicious attack that uses that bliss point of attention grabbing to undermine our sense of community. And that influences what I do. And my hour every night is, I'm not the resistance. I never thought of resistance. We're alternate programming to the poison you're being fed.
Makes sense.
Long answers.
We might turn it over to the floor now and anyone has any questions.
That was 45 minutes. You only asked 4 questions. I'm so sorry.
There's a question here. We'll go in the back just there. Just you, yeah. This one.
Hi, Mr. Colbert, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
My name is Gabriel. Before I ask my question, I'd just like to applaud you on what I think has been your greatest role since, as President of the United States of Masters versus Aliens. My question is on the whimsicality of comedy.
Whimsicality.
Really college student.
I love whimsicality, yes.
I
worked for Whimsy Central for many years.
There got to be sort of a sketch with Steve Carell called Waiters Who Are Nauseated by Food.
Yes.
I worked a job in a restaurant last year, coming in every morning hungover and having to explain the contents of a lobster pastrami sandwich. You totally encapsulated that in a piece. I think the comedy in general in the 90s was quite broad in general, as opposed to its insistence on relevance and context now. I think it's very contextually driven.
Yes.
And my question is, in 2005, you started the Colbert Report. That was an extended parody of pundits. You dropped that persona when you joined the Late Show in 2015. And I'm wondering, does comedy demand more of you today? More earnestness, perhaps, as a counterpoint to what is just beyond satirical on the daily? Thank you.
Thanks, that was a series of great questions. You didn't know you asked more than one question, but you did. How'd you start your question? Quite serious, something.
Just to sum it up?
Just now, what was the first thing you said? How'd you start? Waiters who are nauseated by food.
That's right, yeah.
I want you to know that I'm here because of waiters who are nauseated by food. That sketch came about because I was a waiter, and I was young, and I was 26 or something like that, and sometimes I would show up doing the lunch shift, and I'd be hungover, and I couldn't read the specials, and I would literally not be able to get through them. I had to do my back waiter. It was a nice restaurant. I had a back waiter, and I would say to him, I'd say, "You read these, and you can have the tips today. I just have to keep my job because I couldn't do it." And so when I used to do it as a bit at the restaurant after a while for the other waiters, and I got hired at the Daily Show because of that sketch. And I couldn't get them to hire Steve Carell because they needed another correspondent. I said, "What about Steve Carell?" They didn't know who he was, and he wasn't Steve Carell yet. And this Daily Show was fairly successful at this point, like 2001, 2002. And I said, "He's so great, he can make anything funny. He's one of the greatest guys ever." I know. And one day I said, "Wait, he's the other guy in that sketch." And they went, "Hire him." So we both owe our jobs to that. What was the middle part of your question?
Sort of where you went from the Colbert Report to then yourself.
Sure. So the 90s were much broader, and I would say the Daily Show had, some people say a good, some people say a bad influence on comedy. I remember, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I was doing a benefit. Like the 90s comedy guy was Jerry Seinfeld. He was the king of the 90s. And still brilliant, but he was really the king in the 90s. And I was at a benefit for Jose Andres about 2 years ago, and I had on the former energy secretary for Obama, because we were talking about the Russian threats of using nuclear tactical nukes on the front line in Ukraine. And I show up to the benefit, and what I wrote about Jose had no jokes. I went up there and I spoke from the heart about World Central Kitchen and what they had done. And of course the room expected me to be funny, because that's perfectly logical. But I went up there and I just spoke for 5 minutes about Jose with no jokes. And I sat down, and Jerry was there. And Seinfeld said, "That was good, you should feel good about that." And I said, "Thanks, I intended to get no laughs." And he said, "Good job." And then he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, I just had, you know, the former energy secretary on to talk about nuclear weapons and the use of tactical nukes, and he believes that it's not impossible the Russians will use the nukes, and the tactical nukes is about almost the same size as what was dropped on Hiroshima and everything like that. And I said, "So frankly, Jerry, I'm fucking bummed out." And he looked at me and goes, "Well, you're the one who wanted to be relevant." And I said, I know what he means, you know, you made your bed, no, don't be sad in it. But I said, no, I wanted to do sketch comedy on the Dana Carvey show. That's what I wanted to do, but we got canceled. And then I needed a job, so I did the Dana show. So yeah, the 90s were broader and great, and neither one is better than the other, but I think that our nation has changed. And I think that what people talk about every day. And I think since the 90s, news as a cultural artifact is a much bigger part of our minds. You know, not just with the rise of 24-hour news, but with the rise of Fox News. And so you have not just news, but you have the news you might want on a daily basis, which you always kind of had in newspapers. There were always, you know, politically aligned newspapers. You know, jingoistic or yellow journalism, and that didn't exist in 24-hour news until Fox came along. And so now you had sides, and then the news became like sports. And so you rooted for your team, which I think was the worst thing that's happened to our country, is rooting for your team's truth became the bad thing. And the form of topical comedy that we do was related to that fight. And so I don't think it could have existed before that fight existed. Because then what we're describing back to our own countrymen through the jokes is what their day was like. You know, I don't like to inform the audience. I like to have, this is my experience of what you went through today. I curate the day back to you, my experience. The way I feel about what I do is that I'm like carbon rods that get lowered into a pool of radioactivity, which is our news. And then I get taken out and put in front of a camera, and I irradiate it back to you, the audience, at a non-lethal rad level. And so in that case, it's like a community service. But it's also a community, someplace to go to talk and feel mostly about the anxiety that was fed to you as a product today, from the left and from the right. And so I don't think it could have existed before that dichotomy existed in our news. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Thanks.
Would you like to do the next one?
This man right there.
Hi.
Yeah. Would you like me to give you shorter answers? We'll get to more people if I do. I'll try to do that. Yes.
So as a student who dropped philosophy from their major yesterday, I was very much raised on Letterman, Craig Ferguson, but especially yourself, Seth Meyers, Oliver, and having watched you since 2015 on the Late Show, I actually do really feel that you've done a good job of incorporating love into your show. My favorite part of the show up until his departure was your relationship with John Baptiste on stage. And so my question for you is, one of the things that I've loved coming out of the pandemic era is that you tend to feature your lovely wife, Emmy, on your show quite frequently, something that never really happened beforehand. So I'm wondering if there's anything that came from the pandemic era shows that in your mind are really positive or that may not have happened otherwise.
I mean, what I hope would come from the pandemic era was our acknowledgement that we need community and that we need each other regardless of our divides. And unfortunately, it divided us more, which I think is one of the fruits of the psychological operation. I think a weakness was seen in our society when we were divided and the division was exploited, especially through undermining our faith in our government and in our science. My father was an immunologist, and he believed you should have a healthy skepticism of your doctor. But he meant second opinion, not throw out the Enlightenment. Emmy was one of the best things that came out of it, because we always wanted to do something together, but I could never think about what it was. But when it came and we did the show from home for 5 months, I couldn't let anyone in the house be the crew. So the cameras came in and the satellite backpacks came in and the satellite truck was on our front lawn. And we turned this little library bedroom in our house, tiny, I mean, not much bigger than the stage. Add another 3 feet that way, that's the size of the room. And that became the studio. And my son, who went to Northwestern University, was a film major. And so he had some understanding of how this works. So he was my only crew for a month. But he was about to graduate. So he said, Dad, if I continue to be your crew, I won't graduate. We need somebody else. So then he taught his younger brother how to work everything. And he was a high school senior. And said, Dad, if I continue to be your crew, I won't graduate from high school. And so then my wife, Emmy, became the crew and my only audience and my only guests, only in-person guest for the next 13 months. 3 months at home and then 10 more months in the Ed Sullivan Theater in a storage closet that we had converted to a studio with robot cameras, 1 stage manager and 1 producer. And the only person who came in there was Emmy. She was the only laugh you heard for almost 15 months was just Emmy. And which was fine with me because I remember when I was a young comedian, I mean, how do you be yourself on stage? It's hard. It's hard to be yourself on stage because there's the pressure of the audience. And you feel like you have to be something for them. But I could be myself with Emmy and make her laugh and get laughs laughs you never get on stage. And I thought, if I don't let an audience laugh the way I make my wife laugh, I think I could make a career of this. And I'd already made a career of it, but boy, the joy, the payoff at the end of all of that, to have reached the late show and have that gig, and to be making my wife laugh as my only audience, changed the tone of how I did the show. Because I was playing to her. And so I became more myself, which was a great challenge to go from the Colbert Report to this new show, because I never intended to be a late night host. I was an actor who did comedy. And the Colbert Report was a 10-year sketch that was part of the Daily Show. I was on assignment to do a report for Jon Stewart. That's why the very last lines of the last episode of the Colbert Report, that's it for the Colbert Report. That's it for this report. I'm Stephen Colbert, Jon. And then went back to Jon. He's the last line. And he goes, thank you. Thank you for that report, Steve. Meaning the 10 years I had just done. And then I wanted to go do this job, and to be myself was difficult. But, it was many, many years of trying to do it. And 5 years in, the COVID made me be myself. Because it made me be her husband on camera, which was the best thing that could have happened. And then on top of that, I interviewed my guests differently. Because over Zoom, you're not playing to an audience, you're just having a conversation with someone. And I also put much less pressure on how to start anything. Because we would literally start talking. Like, I could be talking to you, and you're Daniel Radcliffe or something from you're taller, but you're Daniel Radcliffe. And I would say, hey Daniel, how's it going? And we start talking, and 10 minutes later I'd say, thanks for being here. And you go, what? And I go, that was it. Because I would never say we were starting. And eventually I had to stop that. Because the publicists would get mad. They go, you never got to the product. You never got to the movie or whatever they were selling. But it changed how I did the interviews. I was just being with them. It wasn't, I wasn't having to be on with them. I mean, I've got a natural state of kind of being on the response of an audience being present, but with no audience there, I got to be myself. And I no longer do commercial breaks when I interview people. I interview somebody for 15, 20, whatever it is, however long the interview is, and then at the end of it, I do fake commercial breaks, and the editors drop them in where they fit. And so we never stop. So it feels much less like, it feels like a much more natural, much more organic conversation, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without it. And I also saw my audience as more of a community than as a, there's something written on the back wall of Second City. There's a lot of great things written on the back wall of Second City that people have put up there over the years from 1959 till now. Someone said something, and then, oh, that's worth writing down. It's just written down in marker on the back wall. And one of the things it says is, the beast must be fed. You're the beast. And I stopped seeing the audience as the beast. I saw them as people to be with.
You tend to one question does get very short.
Let's go way back. Yes, the young lady with pink in her hair.
Hi. It's been a while since we've had a presidential bid. As an Irish Democrat, do you think Colbert 2028?
Obviously, that's something I would talk about with my family and my fake leader to see whether there is a call to serve my country in the way that I best. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I've tried running for president twice, and they got really mad at me. Even the Democrats got mad at me. But thank you.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Mr. Colbert, for a wonderful hour. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.